Good evening, welcome back to Windows on the World. Do listen to the previous show, which is in the archive, the one before this. We had a really interesting discussion and put some great points over as to where everything's going at the moment. We're going to carry on with that now, slightly digress from what we were talking about. First part of the show is about state lies and spies internationally and in the UK, of course. Now we're going to focus on what's coming up in the UK in the near future. And we're going to be talking about, amongst other things, yes, that far-right conspiracy theory, Brexit. So, Piers Corbyn, you had some comments, didn't you?
Well, I did indeed. And there's comments that have come in, which you're going to come back to, I dare say. But people saying they want us to follow up about various aspects of the failure of state narratives right now. And I would talk, first of all, on Brexit one, and we do the climate one later on. I think it's important for people to understand that the ruling classes in Britain are desperate for Remain, and they will make any lie to try and force it through. And they're calling for a second referendum. But you see, when they call for a second referendum,
yes,
what they are meaning is they want to overturn the will of the people as already expressed on the first referendum. So I think it's important that... Is the sound all right?
The sound is fine.
Okay. Yes. I think it's important that we point out that on Thursday, the 23rd of May, this Thursday, is a second referendum. It's been forced upon people in a way because we were told we would not have these elections to the European Union. But it's going to be so big and so many people are going to vote, and they're going to vote clearly they want to leave the European Union, that anyone who goes on after Thursday saying they want a second referendum, you just say, look, you've just had a second referendum. That is the end of it. Britain is going to leave, and we don't want any more of these games, such as Brexit in name only, a Brino, otherwise known as the May-Merkel Fourth Reich deal. That has to be opposed absolutely, and I think, all parties in Parliament are likely to oppose it. Well, not all parties, obviously not the Liberal Democrats and the Greens, who will do anything to overturn democracy. But Labour's not going to back that, and a large section of the Tories are not going to back that. So that will fail. So then what is going to happen? Well, they can carry on talking to the European Union to try and get some deals, but the best way forward would be, surely, I think has been said by many, to exit the European Union under World Trade Organization rules, which is perfectly possible. World Trade Organization Rule 24 says you can leave when you want, and you name a date, it could be October, whatever, and leading up to that and beyond that, you can negotiate all previous agreements and details of agreements, negotiate them away and turn them into whatever you want in a gradual process. So the idea of crash out is complete fiction. There's no such thing as crash out. We can leave when we want. You see, in reality, what we have now is like prisoners in a prison, led by Theresa May, who's knocking at the front door of the prison saying, will you please let us out? And the prison guards, i.e. the European Union bureaucrats, are saying no. Well, all the time, Theresa May's got keys to a side door called WTO 24, where you can leave easily. Just
we did a whole show on that.
We did a whole show on that. So anyway, my message is, Thursday, get out there and vote. Now, if you've got a candidate in the normal party that you support who's a leaver, then vote for them. But otherwise, whatever, it's important that the expression for leave is overwhelming and definite. So get out there and do it. And any more arguments to come forward say we've now had a second referendum, just shut up, you Remainers, and accept democracy.
That takes us back to the first part of the show, actually, in the controlling of the narrative by the state. That's in other words, that when you get these people trying to subvert what's going on, in other words, the make it about Nigel Farage rather than Brexit. So the name of the party is the Brexit Party. It's not the Nigel Farage Party. But you get this sort of stuff coming up of like Nigel Farage was seen drinking wine when he says to everybody else that he prefers a pint. You know, I mean, and people are actually slaughtering it online, which is the first part of what we were talking about. It's these initiatives and these organisations out there which are basically trying to control the public narrative by controlling what's going on online, and they're failing dismally because there aren't enough civil servants to keep up with the trolling.
No.
And if you want to listen to that, go back to the show before this, Spies, Lies and the State. You know,
but these controllers assume the public are not just stupid but totally stupid. I mean, look, you have to be pretty totally stupid to decide you're going to vote one way or the other in an important national question because of a leader of one of the parties drinks beer when he prefers wine or wine. Well, I mean, what the hell does that mean? It's such unbelievably stupid.
Well, it's stupid, but I mean, it's all they've got. And we talked in the first part of the show about this, about how they're trying to identify what they think are people who are influenced in some way by Russia, you know. And then they go on at the end of it and they say, well, we've got no proof. Well, surely between them and the NSA, they can surveil everything in the world in real time. So what is the problem here? I don't quite get it. You know, I mean, that was the whole point of that first show. In other words, that all this controlling of the narrative, it doesn't work because it's only as good as your intelligence. And the intelligence is a clown show.
That's true, but they're increasingly clever at certain phrases.
Oh, yes.
Like people's vote. You know, think, oh, well, that's a good idea, isn't it?
Of course.
People's vote.
Yeah.
But you see, it's actually the complete opposite to people's vote. We've already had a people's vote. People's vote means negate democracy. Then another thing, they call for the leaders of parties to show leadership. In particular, my brother, you see. Now, when the BBC calls upon him to show leadership, it means you've got to show betrayal. Leadership means betrayal when the BBC talk about it. So they want Jeremy to betray the actual vote of people in the referendum, when Labour Party policy is that the referendum has to be respected, right? Now, obviously there's negotiations and so forth about whatever happens in the future, but Labour Party policy is that the referendum has to be respected. Now, the BBC don't want him to accept that. They want him to trash that as well, and that is ridiculous. It's the opposite to leadership is to trash your own policies in that manner, but when, you know, they're a national thing.
I just got something in from Eric von Essex, because we didn't respond to messages in the first part of the show in the chat box, but he said this is quite an interesting and very relevant point. He said, I think he was talking about this UN human rights lawyer. Now, to actually correct Eric, she actually glued herself to the Shell building and not a train, but that's kind of a minor thing, really, because I'm sure that, you know, glass and metal probably, you know, it with super glue, I don't think it matters. But he said, can the woman that glued herself to a train please tell me what glue she used? The glue I used to repair my sunglasses was useless. Now, this is the sort of counterintelligence narrative that we need to see, isn't it? We need to see people fighting back with the basics. And I think that's a good comment. But he said in the 1960s, hippies were far out. Now that generation is geriatric, they are now far right. Which is, again, going back to the
anyone that doesn't accept the fake narratives now are either far right or far left, or, well, I don't know what else, but they're usually one or two of, or anti-Semitic, of course. Yeah.
Of course, that brings us on to the Russian influence network, what we were talking about in the first part of the show, which is basically it's a clown show that's trying to identify Russia as a key player in disinformation and then saying, well, we've got no proof. They say 76 distinct URLs relating to conspiracy theories about the Jewish financier George Soros, a topic for which fresh content appears almost every day and in almost every corner of the worldwide Russian influence network. No, it doesn't. I mean, most people in this country know who George Soros is, right?
I mention him on my tweets occasionally, but, you know.
Yes, I know, but, you know, you're connected to far-right anti-conspiracy theory, anti-Semitic theories.
I'm not controlled by the Russians. Mind you, I do watch RTV sometimes.
I thought you were a subversive communist type.
No.
Oh, you're not?
Neither a man.
Well, there goes our funding then. What funding? We are joking. I know that's going to be brought up at Speaker's Corner next week.
In fact, I would like more people to subscribe to weatheraction.com. We are totally hard up right now.
Well, so is Windows on the World.
So is it, yeah.
We're going all over the country doing all this for you, and we don't glue ourselves to anything.
No. But
maybe that's where we're going wrong.
Since we've had a little interlude on this, we should have more donations to the Windows on the World button, and you should go to weatheraction.com and order some forecasts, because they're very illuminating. We're going to talk about weather in the next 10 minutes or so.
Yes, this is a very good point, actually, because I'm now working about 40, 50 hours a week on just Windows on the World stuff. It's great, though. People are sending me so much information. I've decided to write this audio book. Well, write an audio book. Well, it's a book and it's an audio book. And all the stuff that we've covered over the years, to actually put it out in a simple format, I think is really powerful, because at the moment, the sort of stuff that we're getting back, it's basically we've got one controlled narrative and it's all the same. I mean, that's what we referred to in the first part of the show, this clown show that's going on, which basically is trying to put everything outside this controlled narrative of lunacy as far right, which came out of MI5 Mark Rowley when he resigned, and now it's gone into these stupid think tanks and NGOs. And it's really, really never been more obvious. But that's the great thing. We're getting stuff sent in all the time. It's like last week at the talks. I mean, I had two guys came to see me today about stuff that's happening in the courts. And when you put it all together, it means that this show knows exactly what it's talking about. Everything that we're telling you is absolutely true, because I've researched it and it comes from all over the country. That's my point.
Absolutely so. Okay, have we finished on the Brexit stuff and we're moving on to climate now, or are you doing something else?
Well, I was just going to sort of finish off this idea of the alt-right, you see.
Yeah.
It says this is this Russian influence network, which they call Riot, which comes out of the Institute of Strategic Dialogue and all the rest of it. It says, as noticed above, we believe we had identified other influence operations promoting the alt-right. Well, what the hell's the alt-right? It's something that they invented.
Well,
right?
The alt-right in America was created by the Democrats, and it's led by fake alt-right, which are Democrat employees. I mean, that's what actually
So you've
happened.
got the intelligence services
completely crazy,
trying to do counterintelligence on their own intelligence.
That's right.
It's absolutely insane. So
they're creating a false narrative of conflict, which is entirely created in order to justify whatever they want to do against it. And
which
that is
just
exactly
the
same
incredible way
as
they
the
promote it.
climate
So it says here, so basically they're talking about people who've legitimately put stuff out on Twitter and Facebook, right, with just their opinions. And they're saying, promoting the alt-right on social media that likely have a different point of origin, but the sub-network identified here is aligned with the Riot Network. Now, this is absolutely
aligned with
the Riot Network,
which
right?
is a fiction anyway.
So there's no such thing as the Riot Network. They've just invented a name to describe what they think is people who are pushing Russian propaganda, when it's actually not Russian propaganda, it's their own opinion, right? So this is the total insanity of it all. And all this money is being spent on this surveillance nonsense, which produces papers like out of the Institute of Strategic Dialogue, like, the rise of the far right and all the stuff we went on in the first part. And of course, in Sweden, they've got the hate-ometer now, and we're going to have that here soon because of George Soros, all right, it's a big conspiracy.
We have a peace-ometer, a truth-ometer, a love-ometer.
This is the post-truth world, Piers. I don't even know what you're talking about.
Well, we could have lots of ometers.
Yeah.
They could just give random numbers in reply, but, it doesn't matter, does it?
Well, we better not have a climatometer, really, are we? Because that might tell us that the temperature's going down rather than up, But we're continuing to research this issue. Well, you need to keep continuing to research it because basically everything that they put out, we put out in the first part of the
made
show,
up.
It's just nonsense. We're continuing to research this issue in an effort to better quantify and further contextualise how these right-wing and pro-Russian networks intersect and overlap. Well, I mean, it's like
we need another grant.
It's a bit like hope, not hate, defining the Richie Allen show as extreme far right, which nobody knows because no one's read it, right? I've got this thing, and I think we'll be in it soon because they get all this money and they have to fill it with this nonsense that nobody reads, but it actually has an effect because
the Keep Talking group of over 60 sitting around talking about this, that and the other was labelled as far right or something.
Well, if you look that up, it's absolutely hilarious.
Balmy.
It was like Antifa targeted them, right? So Antifa thugs outside this meeting for old age pensioners. One of them got knocked to the ground, which was James Thringer's, a peace activist. And this is the sort of insanity that our own government are producing, because they are aligning themselves with terrorist organisations like Antifa through organisations like Hope Not Hate, who are government funded and a charity. You know, this is absolutely outrageous.
Is Hope Not Hate a charity?
Hope Not Hate is a registered charity and a company. It's a charity and a company,
Okay.
I mean, it's just, he says, in the United States, this overlap is primarily focused on the alt-right, the vaguely defined anti-immigrant white supremacist movement. Now, this is the other thing, right? This white supremacist thing, because once you go against anything in this country that the government are putting out, their propaganda or the crap that comes out of the BBC, you're suddenly a white supremacist. And I mean, I think it's desperate and it's become unstuck, and that's really the purpose of that first show we put out tonight, the one before this, because this is desperate propaganda. It's where propaganda fails, isn't it, really?
Yeah. I think this thing about the white supremacist label needs to be hammered a bit more, actually. But you see, we've got, I mentioned this before, what we call the John Snow White test. He complained that he'd seen one of these Brexit marches and said that less than 10% of the people there were black ethnic minority and therefore weren't representative of Britain or something.
I think what he said was, I've never seen so many white faces.
Okay, well, you know,
he's obviously not a Millwall fan.
Well, he might live in Brixton and never go anywhere. I mean, I don't know.
It's just incredible. But it's inverse racism. That's basically what it is.
But see, there's two things worth noting. On the 29th of April, when that was meant to be the non-Brexit day, I went down to Parliament Square and just looked around, and about 20% of the people were ethnic minority or mixed race, which is higher than the national average. And they came from all over the country, these people. So the idea that Brexit is a sort of whites-only thing is completely untrue.
Of course it's untrue.
And the second thing is, when we were on Waterloo Bridge doing a counter-protest against Extinction Rebellion, we did our own little sums there, and basically 99% or 90% at least, 95% at least, were white, young student types, and the number of ethnic minorities in Extinction Rebellion.
Well, the extreme, what they call
tiny, absolutely tiny.
The extreme left and the Extinction Rebellion useful idiots are white middle class.
Well,
they never say that, do they?
No. You see, Jon Snow ought to denounce Extinction Rebellion as white supremacist under his own measures. But
exactly. No, well, he spends far too much time drinking lattes with privileged people.
Or does he drink wine hidden underneath?
Maybe he's a secret beer drinker.
Oh.
Do you think that could be it? I don't know, I'll have to get onto it. Is he that interesting to talk about? I don't think so. But this is interesting as well, right? More interesting than that. For 3 consecutive days in August, this is the Riot Network, right? This is this sort of...
August?
Yeah.
Last year?
In August. The most retweeted Russia Today stories recorded by the dashboard. I mean, it's just a load of bloody civil servants sat there with nothing better to do as well. Yeah, so they're decoding it all. Yeah, it's recorded by the dashboard, involved scaremongering videos appearing to show refugees swarming into Spain. Now, they weren't refugees. They were basically migrants who jumped out of a rubber dinghy and ran up the beach, scaring everyone half to death. So that wasn't some kind of scaremongering video. How can a video be scaremongering, right? Unless it's edited. It was unedited footage of these people running onto the beach and scaring the bloody crap out of everyone. It was
well, they wanted to go and hide and not get deported again. Exactly. That's why they were running. They were, going to merge into the population and pretend they'd been there all the time.
And it goes... as well as a story alleging that the German government is suppressing news of refugee crimes, not climate, actually, of refugee crimes. Well, they are suppressing that. That's mainstream bloody news.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's,
yeah
it's
no,
ridiculous.
That's true. That's
so,
true.
And then the other thing is that Soros doesn't control over 200 NGOs, which are deliberately subverting democracies. So that's another conspiracy theory, according to Riot. Is it? That's a Russian conspiracy theory as well, is it? You know?
Well, it's known what he pays for. I mean, that is something that is public knowledge. He doesn't advertise it.
Well, he's a racist and he's an extremist. I mean, that's all you need to say about him. Really.
In his youth, he was robbing Jewish people of everything.
And his son Alexander is now on the European Council of Foreign Relations, by the way.
God.
As is Chuka Ramona. Oh, he's gone a bit quiet, hasn't he?
Oh, right. Well,
that's really quite useful that the Brexit party kind of surfaced and changed UK. As
funnily enough, I did say at the time, either he will succeed, which he won't, or he'll get a job with the European Union, which he has.
Oh, of course. But anyway, moving on from useful idiots, which is difficult. Mm-hmm. Have you any other news?
Well, I have. I wanted to talk about the failure of the false climate narrative, because it is failing big time, and I'm just looking for my notes on the matter. Yes, in Australia, I mentioned there was this very cold bit, and also an election has just happened there, where it was expected that the warmest were going to win big seats. It was posed in Australia, this election that just happened, as the climate change election, right? The climate change election. And it was expected the climate changes of various parties, but mainly one party, the Australian Labor Party, were going to win. Well, they lost big time. And the reasons why they lost is, one, Australia is crystal clear. There's been massive cold spells in the run-up to their winter, which is about to start officially, but they've already had extreme cold, record-breaking cold, so people know it's bullshit. And the second thing is the policies put forward to save the planet include opposing expansion or even to close coal mines in Queensland, for example, namely the Adini companies. Coal mines, and the people that want to keep the coal mine got or expand it, got more votes because, of course, it's jobs there. So, the warmists are telling people to vote against their own jobs, which, of course, is completely stupid. And this, in the long run, will be the defeat of the climate change narrative. So the good news in Australia is that the warmists were defeated. Now, you could argue about what other policies the relevant parties are putting forward, indeed, but the key issue for people is jobs, and the climate change narrative is destroying jobs. So that is the news there of Australia in climate, and the world on climate, again, in the next, few months in Britain, we're going to have a very varied summer. I'm not going to tell you what that means because I want you to buy the forecast at weatheraction.com. But the climate change narrative of ever increasing warmth is completely failing, and instead we're going to have these very cold blasts at times in both winter and summer all over the world. And what I'm saying holds for Europe, for Britain and for America, and also for Australia, where we are at weatheraction.com developing some forecasts, and we've been very successful in predicting some cyclones heading towards Australia, for example. So carry on with the key message on climate, which is, one, that carbon dioxide is an effect, not a cause of climate, and two, that climate policy is not there to control climate, but it is there to control you.
That's great. And that's really what our talks are about, the bigger picture. It tells you everything you need to know about the current, what they call paradigm, We're just looking into chat here, and it says, the land rights issue, this is Stu, the land rights issue is due for great turmoil. Now, this is a really important thing because we reported last week UK land grabs. Do have a look at that because it's so important that we've now got these fake protest groups linked to the fake protest group Extinction Rebellion and Reclaim the Power and all the rest of these state-backed. Basically, they're also infiltrated by the Green Party. The Green Party are really behind all this fake narrative, and we're going to be reporting on that in weeks to come. The Green Party have been roundly exposed for what they're doing, and we're going to be putting that out over the next few weeks because, as I say, we have people all over the country sending us stuff, and this is from the front line of where real protests are going on. This is the important thing as well, in that Extinction Rebellion are all over the news, yet the people who are actually really opposing things around the country never get on telly. Isn't that funny? Because I thought, that it was real protesters who get on TV, but it's not, is it? It's actors, the actorvists. The actorvists get on television.
It used to be possible in the 70s.
Yeah,
yeah. When we were doing squatting action in Elgin Avenue, Paddington, London, West 9, we did get on TV. I mean, it was news. We were on TV, and it made a difference. But now, we don't. These fake protests get on TV, and I would say that interestingly, a Didcut in our meeting near Oxford, we put forward this Action for Life sort of logo.
Oh, I like that, symbol.
Yeah. And it got a lot of support. So we are going to turn that into a website and so forth. And I think under that heading, you should challenge anybody on climate or on Agenda 21. I mean, they're all connected, these things. In particular,
this is the Global Action Plan, folks. Yeah.
This week, if you get a chance at any meeting on Brexit or whatever, go along to a Green Party event and ask them, does the Green Party support or not 5G, dangerous radiation to control you in your home? And does the Green Party support or not the knocking down of or the cutting down of trees in order to make line of sight communications via 5G possible or more possible? And the Green Party, so-called Green Party, supports both of those things, which just shows you what is the true nature of so-called green. Now, under Action for Life, we support true green, not fake green, and we regard the Green Party in Britain as a fake green operation working for the globalist super corporations.
It's interesting, actually, because just to kind of carry on from what you were saying, I was just reading something in chat, which I actually was going to bring up this week, but Martin's reminded me. It was a statement on Extinction Rebellion from an organisation called Green and Black Cross. Now, these are basically a group of lawyers who represent people who get arrested at protests. And yes, the legal support and solidarity to those involved in protest activity. We provide information about the law on protests, training to better equip people with legal knowledge so they feel less intimidated when going on demonstrations or taking direct action. Now, what they're doing is saying that they're pulling away completely from Extinction Rebellion because they're not able to support them. And one of the reasons is, I'm not going to go into the whole thing, you can look at it. Just look up Green and Black Cross. It's a statement from them. That one of the reasons is that they are putting in people who are meant to be legal observers who are not acting correctly. So the whole thing's a bloody shambles. Now, if this was a real protest, then they would have been shut down. Let's just compare it, for instance, with what happened to the Yellow Vests. I know we've done this before, but those people in France who are having their eyes blown out and getting beaten up by the police, why on Extinction Rebellion getting a bit more heavy-handed treatment? Because they shut down Oxford Street, didn't they? They shut down the centre of London. They're shutting down roads everywhere. Now, this is basically...
Yellow Vest shutting down Paris, get attacked straight away.
Well, they don't necessarily shut anything down either, but the point is that this is a national security issue. Now, the thing is that I'm giving the government narrative here, right? That's a national security issue from their point of view.
It is,
So they're allowing it
to work.
That absolutely proves that Gail Bradbrook, as we said in the first part of the show, is totally on board with the government. The government are totally on board with them, and that's basically what she said. So that quote from Gail Bradbrook is so telling, and I think I'll just read it out again before we sort of conclude here.
Clarify some more about Black Cross in a second. Or Gail Bradbrook.
Yeah, but basically what she said was the politicians behind the scenes, including this current government, are telling us they need a social movement like ours to give themselves the social permission to do the necessary. Now, that is like an internal document from the KGB. That is unbelievable that anyone would say
it's
that.
It's astounding she said it on TV. She must be, well... See.
Are you saying Dr. Gail Bradbrook doesn't know that there's a climate emergency and that the climate emergency is somehow not real? Is that what you're saying, Piers?
She's, let's say, speaking rashly. But can we go back to this black and cross?
Yes, yes.
Why? What's their reason for not providing monitors?
Okay, let's have a look.
Is it the monitors that get there?
Let's just give a little bit more context. XR has provided its own training to legal observers, which we believe to be inadequate and inconsistent. We are concerned that inadequately trained legal observers could be worse than no legal observers. Good point. It is important for legal and safety reasons that legal observers remain independent on actions and demonstrations they attend. The way in which XR has used legal observers does not properly recognise the need for independence. They have been expected to act as XR stewards, often wearing insignia. In other words, how can you be a legal observer if you're on their side, if you're seen to be on their side or wearing their badge, right? So it does not properly recognise the need for independence. They have been expected to act as XR stewards, wearing their insignia, relaying information from police to participants, or talking to the media in contradiction to the established role. Statements detailing conditions imposed on demonstrations by the police, Section 14, were promoted in press releases and social media. This can put people at risk of prosecution, as it creates an evidence trail that people who read these posts were aware of the conditions. Now, we believe that the way XR stories... we believe, this is a very important point, the way XR stores personal data is inadequately secure. For example, in Google documents and forms. Now, we know this because we've got their internal documents, right? So that means that there's people within that organisation who are sharing stuff outside that organisation which compromises the personal security of everybody who's signed up for it. So you idiots, I'm going to call you idiots, because if you give your name to a fake protest organisation and tell them you're going to engage in civil disobedience, what kind of fool are you? Basically.
So you're saying that, because I met some stewards when we were doing stuff on there, so those people were also meant to be legal observers.
Yes.
You see,
some of them are acting as both. That's what
they're saying. You see, which of course is ridiculous. I mean, these stewards, in fact, they, were because somebody attacked our banner, and we had to prevent him from trying to rip the banner off, and then one of these stewards came forward and told the guy to calm down.
Yes.
And then another incident in Waterloo Bridge, basically a guy walking up to me very threateningly, getting extremely close, I said, you're getting too close. And then one of their stewards came along and said, you can't do that. You've got to calm down, mate, and so forth. So, but it's interesting, these stewards came forward very quickly. So there must be a lot of them around. And, of course, obviously you wouldn't see any independent legal observers if there were any, but you see, if the stewards are also legal observers, I mean, that is a nonsense, because if there's a guy there who was intervening in a situation, he can't also be a legal observer.
It says here, we believe that the communications channels XR uses for legal observers are inadequately secure. For example, WhatsApp and Facebook messenger groups, public Facebook events and email lists with no BCC. This also means that communication through these channels is likely to be accessed by the police. We continue to identify misleading and inaccurate information in arrestee support and prison material published by XR, which means that people do not fully understand the risks they are being asked to take. We have heard consistently poor accounts of XR actions and communication from legal advisors. It goes on, but basically it's quite a long list of things there, and it's worth looking at. So if you're involved with this group, do remember that you are being compromised and everything that you give to them is being given to the state because they're a state-backed operation.
Yeah. What's the name of the link for that legal group?
Give it you now. It's the Statement on Extinction Rebellion at Green and Black Cross at greenandblackcross.org.
Greenandblackcross.org.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's really quite interesting. I mean, the thing is about all this is that we've kind of nailed it with Extinction Rebellion. Look at our shows, Extinction Rebellion, The Facts, Fake Protest, Extinction Rebellion. And if you go to Extinction Rebellion, The Facts, you will find all the links there, not only from us, but from the people who've actually investigated what's going on there and the absurdity of this new post-truth idea of fake protest. Absolutely ridiculous. So I think we're going to probably finish up there. This was a second part of the show. And do go back to the first part. But also, do remember that you can book us through windowsontheworld.net to turn up in your local area and put on our talks called The Bigger Picture, which do outline the bigger picture. And there's more and more people who are actually looking at the bigger picture. So thanks to everyone who's contacted us. And do listen to that first part of the show. We'll be back next week at 9 p.m. If you have anything of interest, do send it in to windowsontheworld.net.
And don't forget, second referendum is on Thursday. Be there.
Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Check out our archive and programme stream at windowsontheworld.net.